Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. Opposition calls for better systems to be in place for face-to-face classes, trying to resolve tension in downtown Market District, and later suffers series sweep in India. I'm Krista Campbell and here are the details. The parliamentary opposition is urging the government to ensure that systems are in place for schools to safely resume face-to-face classes after the midterm break. The matter was discussed in Parliament on Tuesday. Andrea Chisholm has that report.
Lack of access to devices and internet for online school has contributed to some children being left behind during the COVID-19 pandemic. While supporting a full return to face-to-face classes, opposition spokesperson on education Dr. Angela Brown-Burke argues that schools should get resources such as sanitizers to obey safety protocols.
I still get too many complaints saying schools are uncomfortable about what they have to do in opening schools, and they don't necessarily feel that they are being as safe as they could.
As it relates to testing, Prime Minister Andrew Holness admits the government will only have resources to do targeted testing. For opposition leader Mark Golding, critical data is needed to inform a public health policy linked to COVID-19.
It is going to be important that we have an idea to what extent our population has developed some natural immunity to this virus. So I would encourage that with that survey be done.
This is something that I had spoken about before. The Ministry of Health has agreed that this is something that they will undertake.
Meanwhile, with the government signaling a return to normalcy by easing COVID-19 restrictions, the Prime Minister is again encouraging Jamaicans to take the vaccine. He says 98.4% of those who died since March 2021, when the COVID-19 vaccine became available, were unvaccinated. Persons with underlying conditions such as diabetes and those 60 years and over are more at risk. From Friday, February 11 to 24, the curfew time is 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. and congregations are based on the size of churches. The number is no longer capped at 100.
While our indicators continue to show improvement, I want to caution the population that there is no room for complacency. While the government is widening the guardrails to allow more economic activity, citizens must continue to diligently follow the protocols to keep themselves, their families, and loved ones safe.
Andrea Chisholm, TVJ News.
The West Kingston police are trying to resolve the heightened tension in some sections of the market space following a double murder of 2 vendors last week. Vendors explain the markets are becoming dangerous for them and shoppers as well. We've distorted some of the voices to protect their identities, and Jamaica Maitland now reports.
It's a cat-and-mouse game between vendors, police officers and the municipal police in downtown Kingston daily. The vendors complain that they have nowhere to sell, buyers nowhere to walk, and motorists nowhere to drive. A recent operation by the police saw the removal and demolition of several stalls that were erected in no vending zones. But the vendors were not too happy about that.
When we're out here at night time by 6 o'clock, we have to pack up. Because when we don't pack up by 6 o'clock, a gunshot and gunman, and we have thief out here. Police are on we at daytime and make sure, and at night time gunman are take we up. Oh, we are going to survive with we and we picnic them up.
Mark out a line and show where we not to pass that line. But the sidewalk is too chock for everybody.
On Princess Street, the vendors have resorted to selling on the corners and the street side instead of the market. But they explain the market now has a different purpose.
Unlike on the outside on the streets, inside the Princess Street market is empty. As you can see, there are structures, but according to the vendors, they have resorted to on the outside because they say the market is no space for vending. According to them, the market is a business place and even game shops. And also, this is where residents sleep.
We can't sell back a shop, we can't sell back a container. That's not fair. People are living at the market.
There's also a tug of war even among the vendors who argue that the market does not have enough space to accommodate everyone.
We believe that there is adequate space that can house most of these persons who choose to vend along the roadways. We have been trying to persuade them to use the designated areas, but this is something that we realize that we'll have to continue to work with them with. But in the meantime, whatsoever violation that we observe, we may be doing the necessary prosecution.
A double murder last Saturday that claimed the lives of 2 vendors have added to the fear factor in the market, one the police say they're working to address. SSP Michael Phipps is commanding officer for the Kingston Western Police Division. He says the investigation is still ongoing. TVJ News observed CCTVs in the area. However, we were unable to determine if they were working at the time. The vendors and shoppers are asking for more police presence in the space, and the police say they're answering the call.
You want to security in the market? Because people in my life at risk. In my life at risk. Because even last week on Friday night, when I was dead, a children come from a selling come sell.
We have had the support of our JDF counterparts, and we'll make sure that there are adequate police in numbers within the general district to make sure that the citizens who use these areas remain very, very safe.
Jamila Maitland, TVJ News.
12 more people have died from COVID-19 in Jamaica, increasing the death toll to 2,720. The Health Ministry is investigating 3 other deaths, and Jamaica's COVID-19 positivity rate has increased to 17.6%. The Ministry of Health says 143 COVID-19 cases were confirmed yesterday from 1,564 samples. The overall case count is now 126,732. There are now 2,439 active COVID-19 cases on the island. And it's time for a break, but stay with us. More stories when we return. Welcome back to the Midday News. The government has responded to critics about legislations which are slated to be brought before Parliament this year. The opposition said majority of the legislations the Governor-General highlighted at yesterday's opening of Parliament were from the last legislative year. Sandy Williams has more in this report.
The Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs is to place emphasis on the government's legislative agenda. Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Kamina Johnson-Smith, gave the clearest indication yet that a robust transformation is on the horizon.
Sign of the urgency with which we're proceeding this year is that the Senate is actually coming back to sit after the House of Representatives this afternoon to ensure that the Joint Select Committees to take the Jamaica Teaching Council Bill and the firearms bill, the new firearms bill, which is to be tabled this afternoon, that the Joint Select Committees are established and ready to start sitting next week. I think that will signal the urgency and the mindset of the government for this year.
One of the critiques from the opposition is that the legislative agenda is more of the same. But Mrs. Johnson-Smith explained that some of the bills are grounded in constitutional complexities and additional time is needed to get them right.
The firearms bill in particular is a full repeal and replace of an old act and is one that is going to revolutionize how we treat with not only the regulation of lawful firearms, but the treatment of offenses in the illegal and illicit side of the industry.
Mrs. Johnson-Smith said it's the ambition of the government to begin the rollout of several legislations in celebration of Jamaica's 60th year of independence.
You'll see significant legislation that is to be put forward in respect of implementation, regulations to implement the NIDS, for example, to make sure we're able to issue our national ID cards in the 60th year. The road traffic regulations will come into effect this year. Those are before the Parliament to be taken.
Sandy Williams, TVJ News.
A man died in a motor vehicle collision along the Araka-Bessa Main Road in St. Mary yesterday. He has been identified as 26-year-old Jamari Jones, an entertainer from Galena in the parish. It's understood that Mr. Jones was traveling in a Toyota motor car on his way home sometime after 4 o'clock yesterday morning. The car collided into a minibus heading in the opposite direction. One of the passengers who survived the ordeal gave her account.
Driving going down to Golden Seas, a car coming from Ochi side, and by the time if you bend the corner, we go your curves and it swing across the road and the bus just run right in the side of it. We are me frightened, I can't even tell her. Come like me turn fool. At the first me I meet in our accident.
It's reported that fire personnel had to cut Jones's body from the car. 4 injured passengers in the bus have since been released from hospital. It's now time for the Business Minute. Here's Cody and Barrett.
In the world of business, Attraction Park Mystic Mountain Limited in Ochorea, Santan was this week certified bankrupt by the government's Office of the Supervisor of Insolvency, OSI. On Tuesday, majority of its creditors voted down a proposal denying the company could repay its $1.3 billion debt to bondholder Sky High Holdings Limited. According to Mystic Mountain's newly appointed receiver, Wilfred Bankalu, once the bondholder's debt is settled, the company can exit the receivership, or the receiver may have to seek many possible solutions to settle the bondholder's debt. In the meantime, the attraction will remain open to the public for business. In business news overseas, the UK economy rebounded last year with growth of 7.5% despite falling back in December due to Omicron restrictions. It was the fastest pace of growth since 1941, although it came after a dramatic 9.4% collapse in 2020 as the pandemic forced parts of the economy to close. In December, the economy shrank by 0.2%. Coming up in the Business Review this Sunday, how one business is turning traditional wood into rustic signs. And that's it for the Business Minute this week. I'm Cody Ann Barrett.
And here are the top regional and international stories with Sandy Williams.
In regional news, Guyana's opposition chief whip Christopher Jones has criticized the decision by the Speaker, Monzoon Nadir, to have an opposition legislator suspended for the next 4 sittings of the National Assembly. Member of Parliament Sherrod Duncan was suspended Wednesday night after he loudly protested a sexist remark local government minister Nigel Darmlal made toward a female opposition legislator. The female MP was told she needed to get a sexual stimulation toy. Duncan objected to the remark, but the House Speaker ignored it and told him to take his seat. Duncan refused the instruction, and the Speaker urged the government to move a motion to have him suspended for the next 4 sittings. In a letter to the Speaker, the opposition chief whip said it is interesting and totally unacceptable that the same level of sanction has not been applied to Minister Darmlal. On the international scene, 5 police officers and a woman were rushed to hospital after a shooting in the American state of Arizona. Phoenix police say officers responding to reports of gunshots were met with a barrage of gunfire Friday morning. At one point, video shows someone inside the home stepping outside and placing a baby carrier with an infant in front of the door. As officers moved the infant away from the
And we head to a quick break now and return with your Midday Sports Report. Karen Madden is standing by.
Welcome back. It's now time for Midday Sports. I'm Karen Madden. Cricket is where we begin as India completed a first ever one-day international series sweep over the West Indies with a 96-run win over the Caribbean side on Friday. Electing to bat, the hosts piled up 265 on the back of a 111-ball 80 from Shreyas Iyer and Rishabh Pant, a classy 56 off 54 balls. Now, Jason Holder was the pick of the Caribbean bowling with figures of 4 for 34. In reply, the West Indies were bundled out for 169 of 37 overs, with Odean Smith top scoring with 36. There were 3 wickets each from Mohammad Siraj and Prishab Krishna. And we will have a full report of Friday's game during Primetime Sports this evening. A strong Reggae Girls squad headed by Manchester City forward Khadija Bunny Shaw will assemble in Kingston next Monday ahead of their CONCACAF World Cup qualifier against Bermuda on Thursday at the National Stadium. Although the squad is missing some of the players who were part of the World Cup team in 2019, including regular captain Konya Plummer, World Cup goal scorer Havana Salon, head coach Vin Blaine was confident in the players who will face Bermuda.
Most of these players have played before and quite seasoned campaigners. We were without a few players that were invited because of documentation issues. Looking forward to having them in the near future. But these are the girls that we have chosen and that I have selected. We still have a formidable squad, experienced players and some new faces that I'm taking the opportunity to look at.
Blaine also revealed his backroom staff, which features assistant coaches Everton Edwards and Tony Cowan, as well as goalkeeper coach Clyde Spider Wedderburn. Former reggae girl Crystal Walters has been appointed team manager. The government has given approval for 2,500 fully vaccinated fans to support the team in Thursday's game, which starts at 7 p.m. Meanwhile, the Reggae Boys' disappointing World Cup qualifying campaign has seen them fall 3 places to number 62 in the world in the latest FIFA World Rankings. The Jamaicans have lost their last 4 internationals, including 3 in the CONCACAF World Cup qualifiers. But despite the drop on the world rankings, the national senior men's football team remains 5th in CONCACAF, behind Mexico, the United States, Canada, and Costa Rica. The Reggae Boys, who started 2022 at number 59, were actually ranked 48th 1 year ago. There has only been one change in the top 5 as Argentina moved above England into 4th. Belgium continued to lead the world, followed by Brazil and France making up the top 3. Finally, as more sporting events get approval for fully vaccinated fans to attend live sports, the government is yet to explain the variance that exists at Caymanas Park, where there is no such vaccine mandate. Journalists at this week's post-cabinet media briefing raised the issue with Minister without portfolio in the OPM, Robert Morgan.
As I said to you earlier, I cannot comment on something that I'm not aware of. So I'm asking if you would allow me to speak to Minister Grange and also Minister Mackenzie to get the facts on the situation, because I really was unaware of what you're saying. So I would crave your indulgence to allow me to get that information. I would not want to comment and give incorrect information.
Fans returned to Caymanas Park on June 20, 2020, after the government granted permission for 1,200 pundits to be admitted, which works out to be about 10% of the venue's 12,000 capacity. So the sports we have, it's back to you, Krista.
Thank you, Karen. Now the Reggae Girls are in action on Thursday. What do you think are their chances of advancing to back-to-back World Cups?
Well, it's going to be tough, but I back the team's chances. Of course, the games are not won on paper. They have Bermuda. They should get by Bermuda and Grenada, which they have 2 days after the Bermuda game. They should get by them pretty easily. And then in the April round, they have Cayman and the Dominican Republic to get by as well. The CONCACAF Championships in the summer will be a little tougher, but I'm backing the team's chances to advance to New Zealand and Australia.
All right, an exciting time for fans on Thursday. And that's the Midday News. I'm Krista Campbell. Join us again at 7 for Primetime News. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, good afternoon.